In recent decades, the far left has formed a shaky alliance with an ideology that, at first glance, would appear to be its polar opposite. Islam was founded by a white prophet who bought, owned, sold, and traded black African slaves and called Ethiopians raisin heads and said that Satan looks like a black man and had sex with his slave girls and had sex with a 9-year-old girl and allowed his followers to beat their wives into submission and to rape their female captives and said that women are, by nature, stupid and immoral and ordered his followers to execute homosexuals. The far left claims to oppose all of this, and yet, due to its undying allegiance to all things Islamic, will call you a racist for daring to so much as question Muhammad's racism, misogyny, bigotry, and intolerance. At first, these two bastions of sanity were held together by pragmatic concerns. The far left and Islam had some of the same enemies, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they became friends. But over time, that friendship blossomed into love, a passionate love, rivaled only by that of Rihanna and Chris Brown. Then something interesting happened. The far left and Islam began to produce offspring. Whereas the parents were diametrically opposed ideologies that came together only to unite against a common enemy, the offspring of these two positions adhered to both positions simultaneously. By the time the offspring learned to walk, they had become walking contradictions. Take Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Congresswoman Omar is a Muslim. She wears the hijab to identify herself as a Muslim. She was sworn into office on a copy of the Quran. She talks endlessly about being a Muslim. She speaks to Muslim groups. If you criticize her positions, she immediately pulls the Muslim card. You're only criticizing what I said because you're threatened by the existence of Muslims. At the same time, Congresswoman Omar is as far left on the political spectrum as a woman can possibly be without falling off the edge into anarchy. Whether the issue is capitalism versus socialism, immigration, healthcare, military policy, or LGBTQ plus rights, Congresswoman Omar is so far left, she makes Barack Obama look like Rush Limbaugh. How is it possible for so much contradiction to be contained in a single human mind? One of life's great mysteries. But if we know anything about walking contradictions, we know that they live in a state of constant self-condemnation. One part of them is always condemning another part of them. What does all of this have to do with me? Well, I love to see people condemn Muhammad. But even more than this, I love to see Muslims condemn Muhammad. And no Muslims condemn Muhammad quite like the walking contradictions called Muslim leftists. Let's look at an example. Recently, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was asked to condemn female genital mutilation.
The other issue is on female genital mutilation and cutting. The Detroit case that actually, where the federal government lost the case because the law was 20 years old and et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to know, will you be able to make a statement against FGM because that's an issue in Detroit? It would be really powerful if the two Muslim congresswomen, yourself and Rashida, would make a statement on this issue.
Needless to say, Congresswoman Omar was horribly offended that someone would ask her to condemn female genital mutilation.
Your second question is an appalling question because I always feel like there are bills that we vote on, bills we sponsor, many statements we put out, and then we're in a panel like this and the question is posed, could you and Rashida do this?
So, she's a congresswoman. She's focused on her work as a congresswoman. Bills, bills, bills. She doesn't have time to condemn female genital mutilation or Israel. She's too busy.
How often should I make a schedule? Like, does this need to be on repeat every 5 minutes? Should I be like, so today I forgot to condemn Al-Qaeda, So here's the Al-Qaeda one. Today, I forgot to condemn FGM, so here it goes. Today, I forgot to condemn Hamas, so here it goes.
People shouldn't expect her to spend her time condemning Al-Qaeda, female genital mutilation, Hamas, Israel, Trump. She's a congresswoman. She's focused on the bills. Just because someone cut something doesn't mean she can sit around all day handing out condemnations.
And so I think, quite disgusted, really, to be honest, that as Muslim legislators, we are constantly being asked to waste our time speaking to issues that other people are not asked to speak to.
It's absolutely disgusting to ask her to condemn female genital mutilation. It would be a waste of time because other politicians aren't asked to condemn the same practices.
So I want to make sure that the next time someone is in an audience and is looking at me and Rashida and Abdul and Sam, that they ask us the proper questions that they will probably ask any member of Congress.
So you should only ask Congresswoman Omar a question that you would ask any other politician. Now, I happen to agree with some of what she says. The condemnation vampires who go around sucking condemnations out of everyone are really, really annoying. I believe that your life should show what you condemn and what you affirm so that when something happens, your position is already clear. However, it's just silly to claim that you shouldn't ask a politician a question unless you would ask any other politician the same question. Why would you ask Congresswoman Omar something that you might not ask Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi? Well, because there are issues that are more relevant to particular groups of people. Female genital mutilation is primarily an issue for Muslims. It's especially an issue for Somali Muslims because Somalia has some of the highest rates of female genital mutilation on the planet. Congresswoman Omar is a hero in the Somali community. So, her condemnation of female genital mutilation would be relevant. It could have an impact. It could make a difference. It could do some good. Speaker Pelosi's condemnation of female genital mutilation would have no chance of impacting that same community. So, can there be good reasons to ask specific leaders to address specific issues? Absolutely. But if you direct a question about female genital mutilation to Congresswoman Omar, she interprets your question as an accusation that she might actually support the practice.
The assumption exists is that we somehow support and are for, right? No, there is an assumption and would not come with an accusation that we might support something that is so abhorrent, so offensive, so evil, so vile.
Why would the questioner, who simply asked Congresswoman Omar to condemn female genital mutilation, assume that Muslim congresswomen support such horrible practices? It's because the questioner is afraid of Muslims, where they come from, what their values are, and whom they pray to.
What we look for, and what this whole conversation is about, is that not only do we not have internalized fears about what we might believe and how that gets implemented, but that we also don't have assumptions about what our value basis might be because of where we might come from and who we pray to.
Let that be a lesson to you. Anyone who would ask a Muslim congresswoman to address an issue that's extremely relevant to her faith community and to the country she was born in, keep your mouth shut or you're a bigot. But most of that has nothing to do with this video. I simply want to draw attention to Congresswoman Omar's position on female genital mutilation, which, as a good leftist, she somehow managed to share in the midst of all her complaining.
That we might support something that is so abhorrent, so offensive, so evil, so vile.
Female genital mutilation is abhorrent, offensive, evil, and vile, according to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. And here we see why she is a walking contradiction. What does Islam teach about female genital mutilation? Fortunately, the sheikhs at the fatwa site Islam Question and Answer were asked to comment on this topic, and instead of whining, they actually answered the question. A concerned Muslim asked, "Nowadays we hear that many doctors denounce the circumcision of girls and say that it harms them physically and psychologically, and that circumcision is an inherited custom that has no basis in Islam." The scholars replied, "Praise be to Allah. Firstly, circumcision is not an inherited custom, as some people claim. Rather, it is prescribed in Islam, and the scholars are unanimously agreed that it is prescribed. Not a single Muslim scholar, as far as we know, has said that circumcision is not prescribed." The Muslim sheikhs at Islam Q&A couldn't find a single Muslim scholar who didn't think that female genital mutilation is an Islamic practice. Let's see why Muslim scholars are unanimous on this issue. Their evidence is to be found in the Sahih Ahadith of the Prophet, yada yada yada, which prove that it is prescribed. For example, the hadith narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim from Abu Huraira that the Prophet said, the fitra is the pattern laid down by Allah, is 5 things, or 5 things are part of the fitra: circumcision, shaving the pubes, cutting the nails, plucking the armpit hairs, and trimming the mustache. This hadith includes circumcision of both males and females. So, circumcision, including female circumcision, also called female genital mutilation, is part of Allah's created order, according to Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. Muslim narrated that Aisha said, "The Messenger of Allah said, when a man sits between the 4 parts, arms and legs of his wife, and the 2 circumcised parts meet, then ghusl is obligatory." Ghusl is an Islamic purification ritual. The Prophet mentioned the 2 circumcised parts, i.e. the circumcised part of the husband and the circumcised part of the wife, which indicates that a woman may be circumcised just like a man. Female circumcision was taken for granted by Muhammad, so much so that he could describe sex as the meeting of the 2 circumcised parts. Female genital mutilation is taken as a given in Islam, according to Muhammad himself. Abu Dawud narrated from Atiyah al-Ansariya that a woman used to do circumcisions in Medina, and the Prophet said to her, "Do not go to the extreme in cutting. That is better for the woman and more liked by the husband." But the scholars differed concerning this hadith. Some of them classed it as da'if, weak, and others classed it as sahih. It was classed as sahih by Al-Albani in Sahih Abi Dawud. The fact that circumcision for women is prescribed in Islam is confirmed by the ahadith quoted above, not by this disputed hadith. But the scholars differed concerning the ruling, and there are 3 opinions. Lots of Muslims try to throw out this hadith from Sunan Abu Dawud. Worst thing they can do. The practice of female circumcision is established in the Sahih narrations, but the disputed hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud is where Muhammad says not to go to the extreme in cutting, i.e. don't cut off the entire clitoris, only cut off part of it. When you throw out this hadith, you don't have any restrictions, and female circumcision is whatever the family and the man with the knife want it to be. So, is female genital mutilation starting to sound like it has something to do with Islam? From an Islamic perspective, there are only 2 areas for disagreement. First, how much of the clitoris should be cut off. A scholar's answer to that question will depend on whether he believes that the circumcision hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud is strong or weak. And second, there's a question among Islamic scholars as to whether female circumcision is obligatory, a girl has to be circumcised, or it's just very highly recommended. This brings us back to Islam question and answer. The three opinions of scholars are: 1, that it is obligatory for both males and females; 2, that circumcision is sunnah for both males and females; and 3, that circumcision is obligatory for men and is good and mustahab for women. Mustahab means recommended. The scholars conclude, thus it is clear that the fuqaha, Islamic jurists, of Islam are agreed that circumcision is prescribed for both males and females, and in fact, the majority of them are of the view that it is obligatory for both. No one said that it is not prescribed, or that it is makruh, meaning disliked, or haram, meaning forbidden. All of the scholars said that circumcision is prescribed for females. Most said that it's obligatory. No one said that it's disliked or forbidden. But how did Congresswoman Ilhan Omar describe it?
Something that is so abhorrent, so offensive, so evil, so vile.
It's ironic that Congresswoman Omar wears the hijab because the hijab is part of Islam, and yet she calls female genital mutilation abhorrent, offensive, evil, and vile, even though female genital mutilation is also part of Islam. We can only conclude that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is an Islamophobe. Her allegiance to the far left has compelled her to condemn her own prophet. I suspect that this is the real reason Congresswoman Omar gets so upset when someone asks her to condemn female genital mutilation. On some level, she knows that female genital mutilation is part of her religion. But as a devout leftist, she has to toe the party line. Hence, her beliefs are in a state of constant tension. And when that tension is brought to the surface, we get anger, we get outrage, we get the squad. Of course, the same tension exists wherever we find that strange love affair between Islam and the far left. Many Muslim girls are victims of female genital mutilation. Many leftists are victims of human thought mutilation. In order to bring psychological healing to our world, we need to draw out the tension, shine a light on the contradictions, and watch history's most confusing alliance break down. Then, and only then, can the mutilations come to an end.